During the WNBA this season, I feel like we sort of had one of those particular growing pains where it's like some of the people that are coming in and watching the sport and are fans of the sport feel like maybe they're there for a weird reason. And now they've found sort of maybe one player to hyper-fixate on that they feel stands at odds with what a WNBA player is in their minds. And they passionately love that player in a way that actually just feels like it's hate being disguised as love that they want to have against the rest of the league. And we sort of had this moment where the rest of the fans had to go like, you paid the same money for your ticket, and you being here is also helpful to the sport. And that's a really difficult thing to do. They had no sort of reverence for the fact that, like, buddy, this conversation's been going on without you for years and years and years. And now you come in here and just think that you can, because you love this one player.
Subber just tipped her hand. And honestly, it's hard to watch. The latest podcast episode revealed everything you need to know. She's constructing Team USA with Paige Beckers at the center while pushing Caitlin Clark off to the margins. The title says it all. The visuals back it up, and every word of the discussion reinforces it. When the league's most powerful draw gets deliberately wiped from your platform, that's intentional. That's a statement. And right now, that statement is blowing up in her face, spectacularly. So let me ask you this. How long can someone pretend the person who rescued your league doesn't exist before the whole world catches on?
From a podcast with Sue Bird and Megan Rapinoe, and the guest was Katie Nolan, and they were talking about the growing pains in the WNBA. And they decided to put out this clip on their Twitter to promote their new episode with Katie Nolan. So this was a choice for the podcast to use that clip to promote their episode. This is not like someone was clipping it out and it went viral. And I actually went to the main episode to kind of watch that clip in its entirety because I just wanted to make sure that nothing was taken out of context. And to be totally honest with you guys, watching the whole clip made the clip that they put on social media that much worse.
Let's break down what just happened on the Sue Bird podcast, because this whole thing has officially moved from sketchy to completely absurd. The episode launched with a title that broadcasts the entire agenda: Team USA 2028. Forecast, Paige Beckers, and the young stars on the rise. Not Caitlin Clark leading the next era of USA basketball. Not even the rising generation steps up. Nothing like that. Paige Beckers gets her name up front and center, while everybody else gets stuffed into young stars. Way to be obvious, Sue.
During the WNBA this season, I feel like we sort of had one of those particular growing pains where it's like some of the people that are coming in and watching the sport and are fans of the sport feel like maybe they're there for a weird reason. And now they've found sort of maybe one player to hyper-fixate on that they feel stands at odds with what a WNBA player is in their minds. And they passionately love that player in a way that actually just feels like it's hate being disguised as love that they want to have against the rest of the league. And we sort of had this moment where the rest of the fans had to go like, you paid the same money for your ticket, and you being here is also helpful to the sport. And that's a really difficult thing to do. They had no sort of reverence for the fact that, like, buddy, this conversation's been going on without you for years and years and years. And now you come in here and just think that you can, because you love this one player, and this one player is very good. She's very, very good. And like, I would love to just openly love them. Those are the types of moments that as a women's sports fan, I like really bristle against, where I'm just like, I hate that we have to go through this, but we do have to go through this. This is the growth period.
Hold on, though, because it gets even more blatant. When you actually sit through the episode, they display this graphic showing the young intern versus the OG's scrimmage, and who do they feature in this image of emerging talent? Paige Beckers, Jackie Young, and Angel Reese. See anybody absent from that lineup? Because it's pretty glaring to me. Caitlin Clark, the athlete who single-handedly rewrote the WNBA's attendance records in a matter of months, who shattered every viewership benchmark in sight, who turned random sports watchers into genuine fans of women's basketball, somehow didn't qualify for the visual showcase of rising stars. That's not a mistake. That's deliberate removal.
For a large group of people, mostly that exist online, it wasn't enough, like, love a player, love Caitlin, love whoever you want to love. But it was simultaneously, they had to then say that every player that ever came before
The whole thing was garbage. During the entire podcast episode, Sue Bird won't stop raving about Paige. The young intern she labels them with, Paige, supposedly acting as the self-designated captain of this crew. Sue goes on about how adorable it is, how they insisted on breaking ties in scrimmages, how fierce the competition got, and listen, I have zero issues with Paige Becker's talent. She's skilled, she's got promise, and she comes across as a solid human being. But here's the wake-up call. Nobody's willing to acknowledge. Paige recorded the third lowest home game attendance. Figures across the entire league last season. You can't create star power artificially. You can't manipulate fans into caring. The audience decides with their wallets and their eyeballs, and right now, they're definitely not trampling each other to catch Paige in action. Sue Bird is sitting there attempting to make Paige Becker's a phenomenon like she's starring in some basketball remake of Mean Girls. Stop attempting to make fetch a thing. Sue, it's never gonna be a thing. The supporters have already made their voices heard. They've already chosen who captures their imagination. When Caitlin Clark takes the court, venues pack to capacity. When her games broadcast, viewing figures skyrocket. When she's sitting out, people still show up for her squad because they're emotionally invested in where she's headed. That's authentic star quality. That's what genuine influence actually looks like. But apparently the WNBA power structure has made their decision to shove their chosen storyline down our throats instead of accepting what's right in front of them. It's like stepping into a diner where 45 out of 50 customers ordered tacos and the owner is frantically insisting you try the cheeseburger because it's secretly the signature dish. Buddy, the data speaks for itself. The audience has voted and they're demanding tacos.
You called sports fandom a complex experience. I loved that so much. Do say more about that. What feels misunderstood or oversimplified or uncovered?
Yeah, I think like there's so many aspects of this that we could focus on. Like one of them is sports hate. Sports hate is so unique, I think. And it's also, I feel like, healthy in a world that's full of a lot of hate that's very unhealthy and very bad. I think in general, hate I try to shy away from, but you've got, we're humans, so you have to have all range of emotional experiences. And I think one of the safest places to put your hate is like, dude, I hate the fucking Yankees. I hate them so much. I hate them so much that while I'm doing my job and I meet a Yankee, I'm like, no, I don't want to know you. I absolutely hate you. It's based in nothing. If anything were to happen to that person, I wouldn't want them to suffer. But you're just like, it's safe hate is sports hate.
But if they got traded to the Red Sox, you'd be like, I love you. I love them.
I'd go, give me a second. I'd go, I don't know, give me a second. But I also feel like in terms of, look, sports fans are men, women, non-binary. Anybody can be a sports fan. I think a lot of sports media caters to a specific male audience. And I also feel like that's a male audience that has not been told that their feelings are something that they can experience. And so I think a lot of the time, men don't even realize how much of an emotional experience being a sports fan is. And so that's kind of part of my thing, is I just want them to feel like, hey, the way that sports make you feel, we can talk through that. So it's just such a weird experience that people who don't love sports don't understand, but that I want to kind of pick apart.
Now let's back up a second, because this isn't Sue Bird's maiden voyage when it comes to diminishing Caitlin Clark and everyone who supports her. Just days ahead of this Paige Becker's worship session of an episode, Sue permitted guests on her podcast to completely demolish Caitlin's supporters. They occupied that space and allowed someone to characterize all of Clark's fans as destructive negative forces who are only tuning in for questionable motives. And Sue Bird plus Megan Rapinoe just sat right there, grinning. Not one syllable of resistance, zero instances of, hey, maybe we shouldn't stereotype millions of human beings. Absolutely nothing. Here's what makes that exchange so maddening. Sue Bird and Megan Rapinoe constructed their entire public personas on championing women's sport. They speak constantly about expanding the game, about welcoming new supporters, about pushing women's basketball into the mainstream consciousness. But when millions of fresh faces actually arrive, suddenly those supporters aren't acceptable. Suddenly they're present for illegitimate purposes. Explain that logic to me. The guest on that podcast essentially claimed that new watchers seem like they're there for strange motivations, because they're obsessively focused on one athlete who contradicts what a WNBA player represents. Let's dig into that heavily weighted comment. What precisely is a WNBA player meant to embody? Because, from my vantage point, Caitlin Clark represents exactly what the league requires. Gifted, dedicated, marketable, and genuinely thrilling to witness. But evidently, that's the issue. She's excessively popular. She's excessively accomplished. She's attracting excessive numbers of supporters who don't conform to someone's rigid definition of what an authentic WNBA fan resembles. The contradiction is absolutely mind-blowing. These identical voices will pin everything negative in the league on Caitlin Clark. Destructive fan, that's Caitlin's responsibility. Physical competition getting too aggressive, Caitlin's doing. Media attention being disproportionate, clearly Caitlin's bird. But when you reference the history-making attendance figures, the enormous television contracts, the capacity crowds, the worldwide recognition, suddenly she receives absolutely zero acknowledgement. Suddenly, the league was expanding regardless, or it's a collective achievement. Or my absolute favorite response, multiple elements played a role. The intellectual contortions necessary to simultaneously hold someone accountable for every negative development, while crediting them for zero positive outcomes, should be recognized as competitive sport. Let's discuss some concrete information since emotions appear to be controlling this dialogue. Before Caitlin Clark joined the league, most WNBA franchises, beyond the Aces and Liberty, fought to draw 3,000 spectators into their buildings. That's not hyperbole, that's verified truth. The league was hemorrhaging tens of millions annually. Television presence was practically non-existent. Average sports enthusiasts couldn't identify 5 WNBA athletes if you offered them money. The league operated sure but culturally significant. Come on. Then Caitlin Clark arrives, and immediately Google queries for WNBA-related material skyrocketed tenfold, not doubled, not tripled. 10 times the volume of searches compared to the prior year. Venues began hitting capacity. Networks began competing for broadcast deals. Valentine dice vanished from inventory. The league's profile detonated, but supposedly according to the guest, Sue Bird enthusiastically gave a platform. The WNBA isn't culturally significant anymore. Because political dynamics changed. That reasoning collapses under the slightest scrutiny. The guest attempted to argue that viewers were only tuning in 12 months ago due to political fractures in America. And now that those concerns have evolved, the genuine supporters are remaining, while the artificial ones departed. The statistics completely demolish that interpretation. Viewership remains elevated. Attendance continues strong. Engagement measurements keep climbing. Audiences are still consuming games that don't even include Caitlin Clark, because she constructed a pathway that welcomed them into the sport. They showed up for her absolutely, but many remained for the competition itself. That's not problematic. That's literally the dream scenario for league expansion. But here's where things get truly laughable. The guest on Sue's podcast actually stated that supporters who are intensely focused on Caitlin Clark are channeling hatred camouflaged as affection. Excuse me. What? So the millions of individuals purchasing her apparel, attending her competitions, consuming her content, tracking her progress, backing her partnerships, they're all secretly antagonists. People are investing hours, finances, and passion watching someone they supposedly love. That's the most absurd claim I've encountered this week. And I've been scrolling social media, so that's genuinely remarkable. Nobody dedicates hours to basketball out of animosity. Nobody acquires merchandise for an athlete they detest. Nobody journeys to multiple cities to attend competitions, featuring someone they can't tolerate. That's not how psychology functions. These supporters are legitimate. Their enthusiasm is authentic. Their backing is sincere. Dismissing all of that as some form of disguised hostility is not only offensive, it's tactically moronic for an organization attempting to broaden its audience. The speaker in the original source raised an excellent observation about the mathematics of massive supporter base. When you command millions of followers, even a microscopic fraction of troublesome individuals becomes a noticeable quantity. If 0.01% of Caitlin Clark's supporters are problematic actors, that's still thousands of voices creating disruption online. Contrast that to a smaller following, where 10% might be problematic. But that only equals a couple dozen individuals. The absolute figures make the larger following appear worse, even though proportionally they're superior. This isn't exclusive to Caitlin Clark. Every major competitor experiences this. LeBron James has problematic fans. Tom Brady had problematic fans. Taylor Swift has problematic fans. It accompanies the reality of being enormously popular. Regarding problematic fans, The guests described his personal encounters, receiving death threats from various supporter groups, including Caitlin Clark fans, Angel Reese fans, and Lynx fans. It's genuinely horrific, and nobody should endure that. But here's the situation. He recognized that toxicity appears throughout all these communities. Yet the complete podcast dialogue centered on portraying Caitlin's supporter base as distinctively troublesome. That's the prejudice revealing itself. That's the narrative being constructed. If you're going to address toxicity, address it universally, without exception. Don't isolate one athlete's followers while overlooking everyone else. And incidentally, Sue Bird conveniently neglected to acknowledge that she's literally directing Team USA. She's the individual constructing rosters, executing decisions, establishing direction. So when she gives airtime to someone who's fundamentally characterizing Caitlin Clark's influence as problematic, and when she labels her episodes to deliberately spotlight Paige Beckers while removing Caitlin from images and discussions, she's not merely displaying bias. She's deliberately wielding her authority to construct a narrative that minimizes the league's most prominent star. Consider the sequence here. Caitlin Clark has participated on Sue's podcast numerous occasions. She donated her precious time during All-Star Weekend to appear on their program. She's been consistently professional and courteous towards Sue and the USA Basketball organization. And this is Sue's response, by permitting guests to attack her supporter base and assign her responsibility for the league's challenge, by constructing promotional initiatives centered on Paige Beckers while acting like Caitlin is invisible. That's not merely unprofessional. That's targeted. The young intern versus OG's scrimmage narrative that Sue shared would have presented the ideal moment to showcase numerous young athletes generating impact. But instead, Paige Beckers received mention by name continuously. Other emerging athletes received vague allusion. Caitlin Clark received complete silence despite participating right there at the camp. The communication is transparent. Sue has determined who the future of USA Basketball will become, and she's going to employ every resource available to materialize that vision, regardless of what actual supporters desire or what performance data demonstrates. Here's the truth that nobody in the WNBA power structure wants to confirm. They're panicked about Caitlin Clark's influence. She's too massive. She's too commanding. She doesn't conform perfectly into the storyline they've been constructing for years. She brought in supporters who don't automatically embrace the social and political positions that the league has built its identity around. And most threatening of all, she accomplished it without requesting approval or adhering to the conventional route of serving time and awaiting permission. Traditionally, WNBA rookies, especially guards, occupied the bench, independent of their college achievements. You were expected to remain silent, absorb wisdom from veterans, and potentially receive playing opportunities in your second or third season. Caitlin Clark completely demolished that framework. She entered and instantly became one of the elite guards in the league. She didn't await permission. She didn't yield to veterans. She simply performed and dominated, and the supporters cherished every moment of it. That disruption of the established hierarchy is what genuinely disturbs people. Sue Bird invested her complete career as the representation of the WNBA alongside athletes like Diana Taurasi and Breanna Stewart. They constructed the league's infrastructure, and nobody's disputing that contribution. But rather than recognizing that their dedication created a foundation where someone like Caitlin Clark could propel the sport to unprecedented levels, they're responding to her like a danger. They're behaving like her accomplishments somehow reduce their contributions. It absolutely doesn't. If anything, the reality that the WNBA endured long enough for Caitlin Clark to generate this impact validates what Sue and others constructed. Pride and vulnerability are formidable forces. Sue Bird revealed her position, and the evidence is everywhere. While she's occupied attempting to insert Paige Beckers into Caitlin Clark's spotlight, the remainder of us are witnessing the league's most prominent star get methodically deleted from the narrative. The absurdity, she's executing it on a platform that only commands attention because of the expansion Caitlin generated. If you recognize this nonsense, smash that like button and subscribe for more authentic perspectives.